Let's start. This is a short presentation on how evidence-based management can be used to integrate psychological principles in HRM and leadership. In this presentation, I have focused more on EBM, that is evidence-based management, and how this framework can be used to propose effective solutions. I have also added the case studies of Google and Microsoft in showing how they use this framework to improve the difficulties at the level of leadership, innovation, collaboration, leadership effectiveness, and so on. So this is evidence-based management, and this is the whole framework I have made it. Simply, if I talk about evidence-based management, it is something that is based on evidence, that is based on research, and not on your personal opinion, intuition, guesswork, your personal priorities, personal preferences, and so on. And this is very important term. Evidence-based management, we frequently used in our research at our workplaces. Specifically in research, this term is frequently used everywhere. This evidence-based management was first popularized in healthcare industry when hospitals were supposed to use evidence-based principles or outcomes in improving their patient outcomes. For example, I can talk about one evidence-based principle in healthcare, say like maintaining hygiene is good for patient health. This is very simple outcome I have told you, and hospitals were supposed to maintain this evidence-based principles to improve their organizational outcomes. With time, this evidence-based management got popular with management, corporate industries, and other industries across domains, across departments of several industries. But we need to know why evidence-based management is significant and what is the use of this term, because we cannot take any decision based on our judgment. If we do so at workplaces, we might end up spending millions of dollars and achieving nothing. For example, if I'm aligning more to participative leadership and without judging my team members, I go on applying participative leadership at my workplace, later on I might realize that it is not yielding any fruit. It is not useful. So these types of things can happen when we take any action or decision based on our judgment and we do not refer to any evidence. So this is the significance of evidence-based management, and this is the complete six-step framework that I have mentioned here. The first step here is that we need to identify the problem. Then we need to acquire the relevant evidence to sort that problem. Then we go on critically appraising our evidences. And after that, we need to pull together our evidences and actually apply that to our workplaces. Finally, we need to assess the outcomes and make necessary changes if required. So this is a complete model to bridge research practice gap. This term is very important, that this is the model to bridge the gap between research and practice. We need to apply to our practice what has been researched. So this is evidence-based management, and we will discuss it all six steps. Let me discuss the first step, identification of the problem. So in our context, what we are discussing today, the integration of HR, psychology, and leadership, the biggest problem here is that psychological theories are not integrated to HR strategies and leadership approaches. Organizations are still applying traditional top-down approaches. They are not considering personality differences of employees, perspective differences of employees, their cultural differences, their background differences, which has led to so many disturbing things we hear daily. Like we hear daily about employee disengagement. Quiet quitting is a new phenomena that we already know. Then we have productivity anxiety is very high in Generation Z. Then we have a decline in leadership quality and more issues such as resistance to organizational change, inconsistent employee experience, and so on. Also, what I mean to say is because of this problem, that psychological theories are not integrated to HR strategies and leadership approaches, this misalignment has created lots of issues at the level of employee well-being. It is because of this thing that we daily hear about absenteeism, quiet quitting, high turnover in organizations, employees are not motivated to work, and all these things. So this is the problem, and we have an opportunity to align, to integrate psychological principles. Again, I would say, I would emphasize on evidence-based psychological principles to leadership and our HR strategies. Again, we cannot use any psychological principle we desire. For example, I might be inclined to Maslow's theory of motivation, but research does not say that it is very effective in the current scenario. So we need to go to the evidence to check whether something is useful at our workplaces or something is worthy of alignment or not. So, moving on, I will tell what are the sources of evidence that we can consider. These are four pillars of sources of evidence. First is scientific literature. These are meta-analysis, conference proceedings, journal articles, your books. These you can refer online databases and so on. Then we have organizational data like KPIs, HR metrics, etc. Then we have stakeholders inputs like 360-degree feedback and professional expertise. Again, professional expertise is not something that is based on opinion. It is a tacit knowledge that anyone gathers over time by reflecting on the outcomes taken for some actions in the past. It is that knowledge. It is a tacit knowledge, and I must say these four pillars or these four sources of evidences can be used in combination to make a robust evidence. So coming back to the framework, we have identified the problem that psychological theories are not aligned with HR and leadership. And then we have seen how can we acquire data using four pillars of evidence sources. Then again, the next step is very important. That is the critical appraisal of your evidence. Without doing the critical appraisal, you can use you might use any data that may be misleading or that may be of no use in your context. For example, your organization might be dealing with blue collar workers, and your evidence that you have collected deals with white collar jobs. So, implementing the research of that study will not be applicable to your context. We have several examples, like you might be operating in a collectivist culture and you might go on applying data from individualistic nation. That will be a mismatch. So to avoid that mismatch and to ensure that you collect the best possible evidence, critical appraisal of the evidence is a very critical thing in evidence-based framework. It is, as I mentioned here, this is a systematic evaluation of research to assess its trustworthiness, its relevance, its value, and its applicability in your specific context. Be it your research or be it your workplace implementation, you need to judge the value of the evidence you have collected. For example, for your research study, you might have collected 50 research papers. You might have referred to 50 research papers, but they have a different focus for research, or they have different context, or they have a very narrow research design, they have very narrow sampling. So these are the things you need to consider while doing the final filter on your evidence. While collecting the best possible evidence, you need to consider all these aspects. You have to critically appraise your data and see what data will add value to you and what data will be of no use. So after doing all these things, like identifying the problem, then acquiring the evidence and critically appraise your data, you need to pull together your collected data to make a meaning of it. And then comes the application. After doing all these steps, you can go on applying the data or research to your workplace. For example, these are several things you can take to apply evidence to decision making. Like you can redesign performance management to align with motivational theories, or you can go on innovative employee development programs like gamification of corporate training and something like that. You can use AI in your employee development programs. You can take different leadership interventions. I have added two case studies of Google and Microsoft, which I will discuss later. But here I just want to show that after you have done all these things, like you have applied evidence-based framework, you have collected your data, you have critically appraised your data. So application can be done in various forms. You can go for technological updates, you can go for more sophisticated technology, you can adapt more new frameworks, you can go for different methodologies like lean frameworks, agile, something like that. So once you have decided that this is the problem, yes, and these are the evidences, these are the things you want to apply to your workplace. So you can go on identifying what are the ways to apply those things to your workplace. So these are two case studies I found very interesting. First is Google's Project Oxygen. They identified inconsistent leadership performance in some of their departments, and they applied the four pillars of evidence that we have discussed. Like they collected scientific evidence, then they collected organizational data, stakeholders' feedback, and professional expertise. Combining all these four pillars, they took some concrete actions in creating targeted training and evaluation systems. They also identified core behaviors of successful leaders and tried to implement that at their workplace. So outcome was amazingly excellent, and they could identify a significant reduction in turnover, or they could also create high performing teams. So this is one example of Google's Project Oxygen. Next example I found interesting is of Microsoft growth mindset culture. They also dealt with the problem of declining innovation and collaboration. So they refer to some studies on neuroscience and reframed failure as learning opportunities. They also trained their leaders to be more empathetic, more concerned of employees' well-being and employees' grievances. And they also use some data-based technologies, like they use some analytics to track innovative behavior among their employees. Again, the impact was quite positive here, and they could boost the innovation culture in organization. They could also increase employee openness and psychological safety. So my point here is to reinstate that EBM, evidence-based management, is a very solid framework that is of great significance to a researcher and to also to leaders and managers at workplaces. We cannot take any action based on our judgment. We need to refer to scientific literature, data, we need to refer to surveys, and we need to refer to professional expertise to ascertain something that is of great value to our workplaces. So based on what we have discussed so far, the recommendation is quite clear that there is a clear gap between psychological theories and our HR strategies and leadership framework. Despite so many talks about new leadership models and evolving leadership paradigms, organizations are still using top-down leadership approaches and generic leadership frameworks. That's why there are so much issues at the level of employee well-being and also at the level of leaders well-being. Leaders are also facing so much issues in dealing with employee demotivation, high turnover, absenteeism, and so on. So this is a clear recommendation that we need to integrate all these three constructs, that is HR, psychology, and leadership. And that's why this is a very innovative research dimension. And definitely we have some future directions that there should be strong emphasis on employee well-being, and we need to develop ethical, moral, future ready leaders who are concerned not only for organizational success, but they know how to balance organizational outcomes with employees' aspirations and their priorities. They need to focus on creating more innovative learning cultures. They need to create more open spaces, more openness, more transparency, like open door policies where employees can come and suggest what they think. They can share their grievances and so on. They can also integrate technology in HR policies to personalize employee development. So these are some of the things that that can guide the future research. Definitely, we have lot more things here, but because of time shortage, we will keep it as it is for now. And definitely, to conclude, I can say that building psychology, HRM, and leadership is not a choice now. It has become essential for organizational resilience, inclusion, and sustainable growth. If we will not integrate psychology to these dimensions, we will keep facing issues at multiple levels that will affect not only employee outcomes, but that will significantly affect organizational well-being and organizational outcomes as a whole. So we need to integrate psychology, HRM, and leadership, and EBM, that is evidence-based framework, is a guiding factor that how to integrate these three constructs, how to identify what psychological principles are relevant, and how can we apply those principles in HRM and leadership. So that's all from my side for today. These are, yeah, definitely my references, and happy learning to all of you. Probably we will discuss EBM more in our coming sessions.